Good morning, my name is Chris Fox, and today we're going to write a novel. We are starting from scratch. I'm going to show you how I plotted my most recent novel. It's an archaeological thriller, Heir to Atlantis. My genre will have specific conventions that yours may not, but the basics of writing a story are the same regardless of genre. And some genres have different conventions. If you're going to write romance, that has different things that are important than if you're writing science fiction or if you're writing historical thriller. Each one of these has different demands, and you need to research your own genre to really fully understand them. But again, the writing of a general novel is really easy to understand, and for most, the hero's journey is the vehicle of choice across almost every genre. Like if you look at, let's say, Indiana Jones, which is an archaeological thriller, it would be the quintessential archaeological thriller from which all other archaeological thrillers now flow. It's a wonderful story, but Indy doesn't really learn or grow, right? And so you could argue that that's not a part of the thriller convention. I would argue fans prefer when people do grow. So you don't have to grow very much, but if at the end of every single novel you grew a little bit and learned and changed a little bit, think the Dresden Files, people like that type of series a lot better, and they're much more likely to stick with it for the long haul because you can see differences in your hero over time, and that's something they love. So that's the model I'm taking. I'm doing a standard hero's journey, and we're going to be using the story circle, which I talk about at length in the book Plot Gardening, which is available on every platform that you can get books, I believe. If it's not where you need to get it, let me know, and I'll find a way to get you a copy. In any case, this book explains my take on the hero's journey. And one of the important differences between my method and others is if you're going to adopt a story formula like the story circle or the 3-act structure, typically you follow it very mechanically and you don't actually start writing until you've got this like really rigid outline. And in my experience, that does stifle some of the creativity. So I use at every major gateway, each of the 8 steps in the story circle that we're going to cover, I use plot branching. So, you get it, plot gardening, plot branching. You are going to do various branches of what ifs. And you can even write chapters for these just as an experiment to see how it goes. So basically you write the same chapter 2 or 3 or 4 different ways, however many you'd like, with differences where you're like, but what if somebody gets shot? But what if the government agents burst into the room? But what if is relevant to your genre and plot? What could be different here? But what if the main character, the protagonist, is betrayed by their closest companion in the scene? You can experiment with it and see what feels good. And the one that actually is the most exciting to read, like especially if you write them all, that's the one we're going to go with. So we're going to use a lot of plot branching. And you're going to see this primarily in book 2. So book 1 is already written for the series. I did do a little bit of plot branching, but I guess fortunately or unfortunately, it was just really easy to write. So there was not much to do, and I'll cover that when we go over the plot of the specific novel in the second half of today's video. The rest of the first half is going to be covering the story circle and how to implement it, and this is way easier than you would expect. I'm going to go over each of the 8 phases. Phase 1, you. It's very straightforward. You are giving the audience a protagonist. This is their grounding point. This is who they will be in the novel. So the first perspective that you show them is going to be who they expect to be. So your chapter 1, you, is this is my ordinary life for my character. Put them in a challenging situation in their ordinary life and show them competently solving that, whatever they do. If they're a computer programmer, they're solving a computer programming problem. Show competency in an area that is relevant to the rest of your plot. So now what we know about the protagonist is I'm them, this is their daily life, and they're good at what they do. After you comes need. You have to give your character a need, and this need is going to last precisely until the middle of the book. If we were using, let's say, Star Wars A New Hope as an example, Luke triggers a hologram from R2-D2 and sees Princess Leia for the first time and decides, I'm going to go rescue that princess. That is his need. I need to rescue that princess. That's going to last until the middle of the book. You need a similar need to give to your character. They have to want something really badly, and they are going to get it in about the middle of the book, but they're going to find out, oh no, I need something different. So that is need. After need, phase 3 is go. And this is all called in a 3-act structure, the first gateway. And this is the point of no return. After this, the character is locked into the metaphorical underworld. And they can't choose to leave the underworld. They're stuck there until their adventure is complete. They have to go through all the trials and overcome them all. And eventually they will return to the normal world, changed at the end. So the go is the gateway. You've got to change something in their life. And remember, you have to look at the story and say, if they could just decide, you know what, I don't want to do this, then it's not the first gateway. If they have a choice about going back or doing it, then it's not the first gateway. If we're going back to the Star Wars example, Luke goes through the first gateway when he gets back to his farm and his aunt and uncle are dead. There's no going back. Sorry, your farm's been burned. The people that you've lived with your whole life, they're dead. You don't have a choice. Now you are thrust into adventure, whether you like it or not. That's an example. You've got to have a first gateway where choice is sort of taken away from your protagonist and they're thrust into the adventure. The adventure itself, phase 4, Road of Trials. And this is all the trials that our hero is going to have to go through to become stronger. And they're going to start off kind of passive and not really wanting to be involved in the adventure. Maybe they refuse the call. That's very common in heroes' journeys, but not always there. They refuse the call to adventure. Eventually, by about the midway point of the book, they're not refusing anymore. Now they are proactive. Now they are going out of their way to drive the story forward and to actively make progress and towards their goal. And at that phase, when they've reached that phase precisely, you're going to go to the next phase after Road of Trials, which is Meet the Goddess. And Meet the Goddess often, but not always, involves some sort of sex, because it's kind of a consummation point of the story, and there's a lot of mythological symbolism to that, but depending on your genre, that may or may not be appropriate. What you're going to do, regardless of genre, your character gets what they were after in need. So you established a need in part 2, now we're at Meet the Goddess, they get whatever that is. They manifest it. It happens, they get through all their adventures, they reach it, but they're going to realize, oh crap, that's in fact not what I wanted. I need this other thing, because they've grown and matured. And so now they view the world differently. And so their needs are different. And they're generally taking on more responsibility. So to go back to our Star Wars example, because we keep using that, that is when Luke rescues Leia from the Death Star. So now he's rescued her from the Death Star, and that was his goal. Remember, he's got it. I saved the princess. Like, I'm done, right? No, he realizes the Death Star is coming. It's going to blow up the Rebel Alliance. So now his new need for the end of the book is, I have to stop the Death Star from destroying the Rebels. I'm joining the Rebels, and I'm going to give everything I have to try and blow up the Death Star. So put me in an X-Wing ASAP. And that's his Meet the Goddess moment. After Meet the Goddess comes Take and Pay. Your hero has to lose something. There has to be a cost of this. If you saw Captain Marvel, that's probably the best example of a story where you've got a traditional hero's journey, but they take out the Take and Pay. If there's no cost to your hero, the audience is going to feel that, and they're going to lose investment immediately. So it's got to cost your hero something. What does it cost Luke in Star Wars? Obi-Wan Kenobi. As they're leaving the Death Star, he's got to meet the goddess. I've saved the princess. Now we know about the threat to the rebels and that we've got to get the plans to the rebels that R2-D2 is carrying. We know our mission. On the way out, in order to escape the underworld, Ben Kenobi sacrifices his life and Luke loses his mentor. You need a similar loss for your protagonist. And it doesn't have to be a mentor. And this loss can be symbolic. It can be a job. It can be, an old way of life. It's really genre dependent. What you'll see in my story, my main character, just to talk in brief about it here, is an influencer, and he's giving up effectively his influencing career. He's like, oh crap, I finally have the big scoop that I wanted. I can prove that ancient civilizations are real. I have it, but now I realize I can't come to light with this, so I'm going to have to sacrifice my career to live with myself, because I know that's the right thing to do. After the Take and Pay, after they've made this big sacrifice, now we're into the return. And this is the exciting part of most movies that you see today, where you've got your chase scenes at the end, and all the stakes have been ratcheted up to 9 million when the scale should be 1 to 10. The stakes are as high as they possibly can go, and everybody's completely worried about the end of the world or whatever your stakes are. That's where your clash begins, and you get to play it all out. And for most of us, this part I don't need to explain. This is probably what your original concept of your book was. You envisioned a return. You're like, well, yeah, that'd be amazing. Well, now you finally get to write that. And the return, the end of it, is your hero triumphs. And then finally you have, let's call it an epilogue 8, which is changed. Your hero is now different than they were in the beginning. So in the beginning, they would not have been capable of overcoming the return. They couldn't have done it. They just were not cool enough to do it. But because they went through the Road of Trials and they met the goddess and, they paid in the Take and Pay, and they went through the return, because they've done all that and they've gotten their allies and they've learned and they've grown and they've changed, they are able to triumph, and now they're a different person. And that's your change. And you're just kind of demonstrating that at the end, that they're kind of back to their normal lives. They've made it back. They triumphed. Whatever their new normal is, obviously, after a big adventure, it may not be the same as it was before, but they're going to a new normal is the idea. It's that simple. So that is the story structure that I'm using today. If that's clear as mud, don't worry. you're going to see it play out as I explain the story in the second half of the video, where we're going to go through my story, and there's going to be big spoilers. So if you plan to read the novel, you can download a beta version of it in the description today. So if you want to do that, then you can wait to watch the second half of this video until after you've read it if you really care. If you don't care, I personally wouldn't care. You can go and see how I plotted it, and then after we read the plotting, then you could read it and see how does he actually implement this, and maybe give me suggestions and we can make it better. In any case, that's the basic story structure. You'll see how I've implemented it. The last thing I'm going to do before we jump into the second half of the video is give you a thumbnail sketch of the novel. So the original concept was the TV show Chuck, but with somebody who's into the archaeological world. So Chuck was an IT geek, and he worked at the Buy More. My character, I'm like, oh, I'll have him work at a kiosk at the mall, fix his stuff. So he is kind of technical savvy, but his hobby is he's really into like searching for Atlantis. And then I realized, Chris, you're almost 50, dude. Nobody knows what a kiosk in a mall is. And I realized I had to take a different tack, so I made him an influencer instead. I figured that that fit a lot better, and I think that it will fit a lot better. So Mitch is an influencer, and like me, he's on a spectrum, and he's not entirely normal. So the way his brain works, he's always piecing together connections, and he's absolutely obsessed with searching for this ancient civilization he is convinced exists, Atlantis for all intents and purposes. And it turns out Mitch is right. And that's basically the plot of the book. And there's a whole shadowy underworld of factions that are aware that this ancient world used to exist in various positions on it. And he's kind of thrust into that world. And each book, and it'll be a long series, is him having an adventure in this world and finding some ruins or some artifact that is from the antediluvian world, from the interglacial culture that I have created for my world. And it's been a ton of fun creating that. We'll get into that as one of the segments where I talk about the research necessary for something like archaeological thrillers. It's not for the faint of heart. I had like 20 years experience in this field when I wrote my first novel in 2014. And looking back at it from 2025, I didn't have enough experience to write good archaeological thrillers. Now I do. It's been 11 more years. I'm a lot more versed in the field. So I feel pretty confidently I can do it authentically. And that is the primary convention I'm trying not to break, which is when you read my series, you should, as a scientist and archaeologist, not be able to look at my work and say, oh, he screwed up here and he screwed up here, and for this reason his plot doesn't work. There should be enough ambiguity in my pseudoscience of the Atlantean civilization that it could be plausible. And that's my only goal, because that sort of storytelling is really fun, and I know there's a rabid fan base for it because I'm a part of it. So let's jump into the second half of the video, and we will meet Mitch Dorkenheimer, my protagonist. So we're looking at a outline in Scrivener of Book 1 and Book 2. So Book 1's already finished. All of this stuff's written, edited, or at least self-edited. I haven't put it to an editor yet. But the book is more or less complete. So it begins looking like this, and Book 1 looked exactly like this, where a lot of the folders were still empty. I hadn't dropped in files to represent the chapters. But my goal is clear. I know I need to end up with like 50 chapters and of good content, and I know they're going to have to be around 1,500 to 1,800 word chapters. So in Book 2, I'm going to do exactly the same thing, make sure I have that much content as I'm going through here laying out chapters. And that's easy to do. If you think you're going to be short on word count, you just make more stuff happen in the Return and or the Road of Trials, and that typically will get you where you want to be. And you may see me do that with the outline for Book 2. It's certainly what I did for Book 1. But you notice, we just went over the story circle, that I use it here. You can see, here's your need, here's your you, here's your need, here's your go. All the standard stuff that we just talked about. And I want to give you a brief overview of how I use the story circle in Book 1. So my outline file was something like this, which is about 1,700 words long. It's just me sitting down and typing out what I want to happen in each section. And then I broke this into chapters. I'm just going to scroll down a little bit so you guys can read some of this, if you should so desire. And the plot obviously changes as I start writing. So what you see here may not make it to the final version, because each time I get to an end of a section, I'm going to start doing a little plot branching, and I start veering wildly off course, which does lead to some awesome parts of the books. Now, if we go back to Book 1 here, We can see in the U section, Mitch is being an influencer. That's his job. You got to show him being competent. Ideally, you're also saving the cat, meaning that you see him being a nice guy. He's trying to save a cat in a bad situation or help somebody for no other reason than just to be a good guy. You can work that in, and you don't always have to, but if it fits in your plot, it will make a lot more of your audience sympathize with that character. In Mitch's case, he suspects the location of an ancient shipwreck. And when I say ancient, I mean prehistory, before ships should have existed. This would have been 12,000 years ago during the height of the Younger Dryas, which was a warmer period in history. So for a lot of our immediate past, we had ice ages, made it very hard for our species to thrive, but this was a period of relative warmth, so we thought maybe there was some sort of empire back then, some sort of civilization. He suspects it. He believes it was the Atlantean civilization, and it turns out he's right. He finds a shipwreck where he thought it would be based on the sea levels would have been lower back then. He does some extrapolation, looks for an area, finds it, and after some exploration is successful. In the need section, he discovers inside the ship some artifacts that are Atlantean, and from this realizes, wait a minute, Atlantis was definitely real, and now I need to find Atlantis, and I think I know where it is. So we've got this need firmly established for the middle of the book. For Go, he's not the only person who realizes what's going on. Mitch is pretty naive, just like me. So he's broadcasting his success to the world. And a lot of people are watching, and they realize you found an ancient shipwreck, and they realize the value of it. And some of those parties are quite nefarious. So one of the parties who becomes your interlude character, Yvette, is an agent from a mysterious agency that wants to stifle any knowledge of the ancient world coming to light. And she and him have a clash in Go, and I won't give you the specifics, you'll probably want to read it. But Mitch loses some stuff to Yvette, and she damages his career, and afterwards he can't go back to the way things were before. So now he's firmly into the road of trials, and you can see just how much longer that is than the rest of the book if we scroll down. Like, the return's pretty long compared to some other sections. Meet the Goddess is 1 to 2 chapters in most cases. Taken Pay is like 3, your Change is like 1. But your Road to Trials can be like 25 chapters, 30 chapters. It is a lion's share of the book. And when I say Meet the Goddess being the middle of the book, it's more the middle of the story and can come greater than 50% of the way through. So Mitch is in his road of trials. He needs to go prove that Atlantis is real. And the long and short of it is Mitch finds out that there's a place called the Fortress of Atlas in the Atlas Mountains that survived the destruction of Atlantis. And he makes for that fortress. He's right. He finds the fortress. That's the Meet the Goddess here. He gets inside the fortress. But along the way, he's been ambushed by some pretty shady characters and now realizes, oh crap, I can't reveal this to the world. If I do, this place will not survive, and this place is vital to the human race's survival. So he has to kind of sit on what he knows and not try to go public with it. That gets us through the Take and Pay. We're into the Return. Some bad people come and try and take the fortress away, and he and the agency people, Yvette, that's been chasing him, actually have to band together and block their enemies and stop them from overwhelming and taking the city. So we've got our fantastic battle that we all want to see, and in ancient temples and solving ancient puzzles to avert the end of the world. Good stuff. And that gives you a pretty good look at how I've implemented the plot. I don't want to belabor it too much. Like I said, you can download the beta version of the book and read it for yourself if you're interested. It's not terribly long, but it should give you a little more insight into how I've kind of done this. And then book 2, I'll probably do an additional video, and I'm thinking maybe next week, because by that point the outline will be much more fleshed out and I'll have the first 25,000 words written. So maybe we'll do it that way. Let me know in the comments if that works, or if you have better suggestions, or what else you need to know. Like, am I going in-depth enough? Am I going too in-depth in certain areas? Be honest in the next couple of videos. We'll try to correct for that. In any case, I do need to get back to the writing. I still have to do 4,000 words today, and it is already after 11, so I need to get to work. I will see you guys next week.